Hey, Doug, you can start whenever you want.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see if Jonathan gets on here. Hey, Mark, you want to set in for Jonathan? All right, we're going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Harris, Bubb, Blake, Marmee, and Labuda sitting in for Lang. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $10,700. Is anyone here from the tax department or going to speak for them?
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
If you can hear me, this is David. I'll speak to it. It's a retirement in the tax department. It's termination sick, vacation, termination, and termination of comp. That adds up to that dollar figure.
Okay. I have a motion by Bubb.
Second.
Second by Labuda. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Newark to enter into a community development block grant funded sub-recipient agreement with the hereinafter named organizations to carry out activities included within Newark's fiscal year 2020 community development block grant one-year action plan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Mark. Pretty straightforward. This is our annual list of subrecipients that made application with us last year. Last year, meaning Barbara sends those applications out in July and gets them back in August. Then we have a public hearing on everything once we set our one-year plan budget. And so these are all the subrecipients that you see here listed in the dollar amounts that we're hopefully going to be able to fund each of those for.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Bubb. Was that Jeff Harris? Was that a second from you? Okay, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion?
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Blake.
I'm just curious. With last November, council had taken $30,000 out of the budget stabilization fund and gave to the homeless task force consultants. Was there any consideration out of these dollars if the homeless efforts would be needed? Any future money there?
Yeah, Jeremy, we gave a lot of consideration. If you were to compare these figures to last year's and actually the last previous year's figures for allocation dollars, we are probably in many cases double what we were funding. And we did that with a concerted effort because of all the initiatives from Newark Development Partners and United Way and Salvation Army, and everyone this past year has been working really hard on the homeless situation. Obviously, NDP got a hold of the building on East Main Street, the old dollar store. So we actually increased our amounts from the CDBG funds this year to specifically target and help out all these organizations that do help the less fortunate and the homeless. And that's over and above that 30,000 that came from the city.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Will we know what the efforts were, or will council get a report from what we spent on that $30,000? Will we know what came from that?
Dave Rhodes, are you on?
Mark, I am on. Are you there?
Can you speak to that 30,000?
Yeah, that $30,000 was, I believe, matched by the county commissioners, and then private sector dollars were raised also. And those dollars went to hire the professionals that are doing two things. Number one, there's a group that's doing a build out plan for the proposed shelter. And then there's another proposal coming in for a plan for the cost to operate the shelter. Now, let me be real clear. The dollars to build it out and the dollars to operate it have yet to be identified. So what our $25,000 were and went to, or what our $30,000 went to, was to hire the consultants. We're awaiting community discussions that are ongoing to get final blueprints of that. But Jeremy, I think everybody in the city that's involved in this will have copies of those, including city council.
Since we gave 30,000, I just want to make sure that we are updated at some point is what I was wanting to make sure we get across.
Yep. And anybody's can reach out to Deb Dingus and other people that are involved and get involved in part of those discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. And with
Thank you,
that,
Mr.
the
Chair.
Finance Committee meeting stands adjourned. Yes, next up is service.
Bear with me here just a second. Is Ryan Bob not here? Oh, there he is. Okay. All right, we'll call the service committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Harris, Barker, Blake, and Bub. Up first, we'll consider resolution number 20-40, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio, to enter into a contract without competitive bidding for the construction of the underground electrical and other utility infrastructure in the downtown area. Mr. Moorhead, I assume.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. As you have probably seen on the memo that I attached, we're we've been trying for over a year now to accomplish a project in cooperation with AEP. They desperately need to remove or replace the overhead transformers in the alley next to the Golden Walk and also in the alley next to Moe's Barbecue. And they approached us with the idea of trying to get those put underground along with all the accompanying wires that go with those. And we've been, as I said, working for the past year to try to figure out the scope of the project and how to accomplish that. And we would like to be able to hire a sole contractor to do that. We have been working with Claypool Electric on this project. They did the project behind Canal and Market, privately funded a couple of years ago, and they're very well versed in what needs to be done. They're actually putting a price together at this moment, so I don't know what the exact cost is, but we will know that in the next couple of weeks. So I guess if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. This would just be for the underground portion of the work, which is basically the conduit, the foundations for the underground transformers, and that part of the infrastructure. And then AEP would actually do the relocation of the lines, basically pulling the new wire through the conduits, installing the new transformers, and then completing the hookup. So basically the part that would have to be funded by outside sources other than AEP would be the, as I said, installing the conduits and the foundations for all the underground portion of the work. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
So Brian, for AEP's portion of the work, that's at no cost to the city? Or that is to a cost to the city?
I believe at this point it is at no cost to the city. We've got a short time window to take advantage of that. AEP is a willing participant at this time. However, if we choose not to do the underground portion of the project and AEP chooses to replace those transformers on poles, and then come back late, and then we come back in a year or 2 years and say, oh, we'd like to have that buried now. At that point, there would definitely be an additional charge for that.
And
So we're trying to take advantage of the of a project that AEP has planned. Several of the adjoining property owners are interested in participating, and it would do a lot to clean up those alleys and make them much more pedestrian and public friendly.
I know you said you didn't have a dollar figure, but could you give us a ballpark for the expense for Clay and Craft?
You know,
You come within $50,000.
I don't know if I can do that. I might, I would say it's probably going to be in the $200,000 range, something like that, just guessing.
So why would we not bid that out?
The reason that we would like to waive the bidding is because if we are going to bid it out, it'll require us to put together an entire detailed set of plans. Claypool Electric is very well versed on what needs to be done. We have been able to tell them the conduit sizes we want. They basically know the specifications that we used on Canal and Market, and those same specifications would work for us. So we'd be able to save the funding from put the funding towards the project, as opposed to spending funding on a detailed set of electrical plans that we would have to hire an outside designer to put together. And then just basically their familiarity with the downtown and their experience working with both AEP and private entities in the downtown area. And then third, basically a way to save time on the whole project.
Great. Any other questions for committee members? Mr. Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I recall correctly, the lines that go by Golden Walk, those power the courthouse. Has the county been involved with this project at all since they power the building?
They would, yes, they would have to make the connection underground. We already have a conduit underneath North Park Place, and in the inside of the courthouse square, inside of the sidewalk area, there would be a transformer that sits there. And then basically they would have to connect, remove their overhead and connect to sort of the northeast corner of their building with an underground line to complete that installation on their end. So have they been contacted? I believe they have been contacted about this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion? Motion by Mr. Bub. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on to council signify by a thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. If I can find my mouse, I will move on to the next. Discussion of a future grant application with the Village of Johnstown and others regarding the proposed U.S. DOT Intelligence Transportation System, ITS for U.S. funding opportunities. Who is to speak on that?
I'll speak on that as well, Jeff.
Okay. Brian?
So, yes, Jim Leonard from the Village of Johnstown sent me a note and asked if we could have a discussion. And that's basically all this is tonight. We're not asking for any action. So we're just having a discussion. There is a $40 million grant opportunity available from the US DOT. And it is to develop innovative solutions for increasing complete trip mobility for targeted segments of our population, people with disabilities, low income, veterans, older adults, et cetera. And the idea is that it's for basically complete trip deployment. Basically, the idea is that it means that some of these travelers are not able to complete some of their trips to different things, whether it be the doctor or grocery stores or whatever. And so there is grant funding available to study those things, study unique or current solutions that improve the mobility of these different parts of the population. And some of them are getting to work. Some could be an example of somebody can get to work, but they can't get home, or they can get to work, but they can't get to a doctor's appointment, those sort of things. So basically, there's a website that's available if you want to research more of it. I don't know 100% of all the details of this, but Jim has contacted Village of New Albany, CODA, Drive Ohio, ODOT. He's in contact with Mount Vernon, Heath, and Granville, and also LCATS here in Newark. And basically, the idea is that if we can
Are you still there? Can anybody else hear him? Brian is gone. Let's give him a minute or two and see if he resurfaces.
Sorry, I think I might have disconnected there. So basically the idea is with a large enough population, we'd be more competitive in the grant application. So they would like for us to consider to be a part of that. And the application period will be later on this summer. There may be some legislation needed at that point, but this is just for information at this point. And there is a website available. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll just send all you council members the link to it, and you can have a look at it as well. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them, but this is basically for information at this point.
So Brian, this is being spearheaded by Johnstown? This is being spearheaded, I'm sorry, I need to lean forward when I talk. This is being spearheaded by Johnstown? Brian? Brian?
Yeah, I'm not hearing
Hey.
anything right now.
Brian, can you hear me?
That would be a no.
Yeah, no.
Can you turn your speakers up? Turn your volume up. Crank up the volume.
Hey, Spencer, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Brian. I'm going to send you a chat of what Jeff's asking.
Okay.
While you're at it, Spencer, what am I?
Jeff, you want to ask me again?
Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me. While you're at it, ask him why this isn't being spearheaded by LCATs, and are we getting into the transportation business again? You know, why isn't Licking County? I guess what's our role?
Okay.
Or that, however.
Hey, Brian, are you? Oh, he's gone. Brian, are you back? Can you hear me?
No.
Or can you get chats?
Yeah, I disconnected again, guys. I'm not sure what's going on here.
Just also asking, what's he need from us today?
Yes, Johnstown is kind of the lead on it.
He is gone from the meeting again. Something's wrong with his connection.
All right. Did anybody else have any questions for him? No?
I had similar question you did, Jeff, as to how it relates to the county. I mean, there's currently a county transportation study going on, so I wanted to see how that related to that effort.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good question. And then the other question would be, what does he need from us tonight? So if he comes back, that's the last item on the agenda. Let's see, somebody just moved. Yeah, he's still gone.
Yeah, he's gone. I did though. Just while earlier in the day, I asked when I was reviewing the packet, because I saw it was from Johnstown. I did send a message to Jim Leonard, just trying to get some more information, and he has offered to do like a Zoom meeting sometime this week, just to explain to me why he's doing this. So I'd be happy to forward that out to anybody if they'd like to also hear from Jim.
Sure. Yeah, you could actually, Spencer, that's a great idea. Why don't you send a Zoom invite to everybody on council? Anybody that wants to attend is free to do so.
Yeah, I will do that.
Looks like Brian is back, although you're muted, Brian, but can you hear us? Brian, you're muted, but can you hear us? I'll take that as a no.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
I
think so.
disconnected like 3 times there for some reason.
Okay.
and I'm at work.
So at this point in time, we'll disconnect, or I'm sorry, we will adjourn the service committee meeting.
All right.
And up next will be rules. And we'll talk about rules.
Okay. Is Doug Marmee still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you, me, and Jeff are on this committee. All right, well, we'll call the Rules Committee meeting to order. Members present are Doug Marmee, Jeff Harris, and Jeremy Blake. Our agenda item tonight is discussion on health and safety considerations for the well-being of city council members, city officials, and public participation for the purpose of in-person city council meetings to resume. Also on our call for our discussion tonight, we do have Chad Brown from the Licking County Health Department is in on our Zoom with us. And I'm thinking for us how to proceed for tonight is probably best to hear probably from Doug Sasson on the state order and explaining when city council must return to in-person meetings. And then I know there's been some different scenarios being discussed about how best to return to in-person meetings. So after we hear from Director Sasson, then we can hear from Director Rhodes about returning to council chambers. And then the other options being discussed has been having some meetings up at the high school. And so I guess I'll begin with just asking so that Director Sasson can make everyone aware, if you could explain to us the state order, which is allowing us to meet virtually and when we're required to return to in-person meetings. Director Sasson.
Fairly simple answer. We are authorized by not only the legislation that was passed by the General Assembly, but also by order of the Attorney General to continue these virtual meetings, or whatever you call them, e-meetings, Zoom meetings, as long as Ohio remains under a state of emergency, which we are now. I believe the current state of emergency is in effect until the end of June. It may or may not be extended, but the legislation also says that that ability, absent some future action by the General Assembly or the Attorney General, that ability to meet virtually will not extend past the end of December 2020. So at this point, as long as the state of Ohio is under a state of emergency, we can continue to meet remotely. When that state of emergency is lifted, we're back to the old-fashioned public meetings in person in city council chambers or wherever you decide to hold.
Any questions for Director Sasson on clarifying that when we got a return? Okay, seeing none. I don't know if Director Rose or even if you, Don, wanted to talk about the options related to returning to council chambers. I know you guys had some discussions related to that.
Well, I'll let Director Rhodes speak to that since he's got it all mask off if you haven't been down there today.
All right. All right. Hey, we went downstairs and taped off for social distancing. And what we found is we would have a total of 11 seats in the audience area. But of those 11 seats, some would have to be taken up by a couple council members, a few council members around a round table, and possibly 4 or 5 people up normally where council members would sit. So that would leave approximately about 5 members of the general public to have seats. Who wouldn't have seats up there would obviously be the mayor and the law director, but they would be in the audience, social distancing as well. So that's kind of how it lays out if you take social distancing practice into being. Don and I also met with the representative from Richardson Glass to see about hanging partitions and putting some of those things in. And I do not have that quote as of yet. When I get it, I'll share it with everybody. We did do some separations up in the clerk's office that I thought was fair to do, even if we didn't have this pandemic going on. If you haven't had a chance, go on up and take a look at Marcia Phelps's office. I think that was pretty well done. So with all that being said, 11 people in the audience, a couple of those would be council members, a couple of those, 5 people could be members from the public. People from the public could come up and speak at the podium and then leave. The podium should probably be wiped down each time after somebody comes in. We could have the staff available to scan people in. I'm hearing that their temperatures need to be checked, and I'm hearing other things need to be looked into. We haven't gotten that far into it as of yet. So that's kind of how it lays out to return to council chambers.
All right, thank you, Director Rhodes. Did anyone have any questions related to returning to in-council chambers? Don?
Thanks, Jeremy. We had talked about at least staying virtual for the month of June. So I think that's a definite. So this meeting tonight and then the next meeting in June, we'll stay with the Zoom. Also, we can add, talk to Spencer, we can add citizens' comments if everyone would like to do that. That seems to be a sticking point with some folks. So we can add that for the next meeting, and he has figured out a way we can do that. But after that, it's a good question. I mean, I guess I'll let you talk about the conversation with the high school and then I'll chime in.
Okay. Jonathan, you had a question before we move on?
Yeah, just before we switch over to talk about the high school option, I think, Dave, just to clarify, if we did go into chambers, in order to make sure everybody's recorded, we'd probably need to do something with the microphones. You and I discussed this a little bit. I think we maybe need to hang more microphones. We talked about potentially having members of council go up to a podium, which I don't know. And Chad, feel free to jump in on that. But to me, it seems like you'd have a lot of people going up to the podium, and there'd be potentially a lot of sanitizing that need to happen in the middle of the meeting. It might become a pretty cumbersome meeting.
I couldn't agree more in those regards. We just haven't went to the point of hanging additional microphones. What the first directive that I got from Don is just take a look and see how many people you can sit in there. We're considering other alternatives. So that's kind of what we did. If the directive is to return, then the next thing I'll get back to the council president is microphones, positioning of those microphones, and costs to do so. We currently do have microphones hanging, so it's not a new idea. Could we position some in other areas? Sure, we could. And if the direction is to come back to council chambers sometime in July or August, I think there's still enough time to do that. Don't have any idea of the current cost or anything along those lines.
But there probably would be some cost for those microphones. We just need to figure out what that would be.
Yeah, and I don't know if, I don't know how the ones hanging in front of the council members, how easily those would be moved. I mean, it might be just an incidental cost. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do have them hanging down there for everybody currently. It just could be a matter of repositioning. I don't know how long those cords are up in the ceiling, and I don't know about that. But we do have the microphones, which would be part of the cost, just a matter of repositioning them.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question regarding the council chambers? Well, I'll go ahead and report back to this committee and to all the members of council that myself, Don Ellington, Jonathan Lang, Spencer Barker, and we met with the high school principal, Tom Bowman, and Superintendent Doug Ute about the option of city council meetings in the high school commons. The school district is very agreeable to being a community partner with us in that regard. This would allow the city council to have a larger space so we could each spread out and social distance and allow members of the community to attend and participate during our in-person meetings. It was indicated to us that there will be no cost to the city. The school district will work with their own staff to cover the time that the building is open to city council in the evenings. And the only issue up there, and Spencer and I went up and met with the high school principal this morning, was that the use of multiple microphones is an outstanding issue that we're going to have to get resolved. They have 2 microphones in that space, but obviously we would need more than that. And so that's another option available to us that we have been exploring. So I don't know if some of the others who were in on that discussion want to fill in any gaps that I might have left out, but that's a quick summary of what that option is.
Yeah, I would just, Jeremy and I did meet there this morning, and I did talk to Tony Adams because the 4 of us had kind of decided, if we would go somewhere else, we need an audio system. And so Tony and I had a long discussion about it today, and Tony does not have the number of microphones that we would need, nor does his soundboard do that many inputs currently. Tony's of course said that he could buy it, but then he also said it may be better for the city to buy it. And so Tony is working on getting me the costs of all that, the whole system, the board system, everything, because we simply, like Jeremy said, aren't going to be able to utilize the school system. This also requires us to record the meeting. So we would have a camera set up that I would provide and record the meeting that way. The also other considerations we have is we would then be held to the rules kind of laid out by the education system on in their building, whereas masks at all times, everyone who comes in and out of the building while we're there will have to be temperature checked, and that will have to be recorded. We also would be responsible for any security that would be needed. So currently in council chambers, we have security with metal detectors. If we would want just a Newark police officer, we'd be responsible for that. Also, if anything happened, God forbid, we would be liable for that as well. Just from talking to Tom, and I think Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, he was going to double check that with Superintendent Oot today. I hadn't heard anything. I don't know if he got back to you on that, but just liability wise, we'd be liable. I think in my opinion, there's a significant cost for us to move the meeting location. But if that's what everyone wants to do, we can look at that. But just the soundboard that would be required is probably $3,000 or $4,000 to do this, when we're spending $16.07 a month on our current platform. So that's my kind of 2 cents on that.
Was he getting a quote for just 7 microphones, or how many microphones was he getting a quote on?
So he was getting, basically it was microphones are each an individual price each. And so he was going to quote it for 7 or for 14 or 15. So there was one for the public.
Okay. Dee, you had a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I have a question about the public. Do we let them in, or would that still be a YouTube situation, or what?
So when we were at Newark High School today, they kind of, there would be space that we could let maybe 5 rows of 4 chairs, space 6 feet apart. That could be set up. By the time, I think, Jeremy, that we would need the space, they said they would have everything sanitized. But again, they just would have to sanitize after again. And I guess I didn't think of that till now. Is that on us to sanitize, or is that on them to re-sanitize? I didn't think of that. And it is on us to take the temperatures, no one from the school will be there to do that.
I got the impression that with the custodian be there, that they would be able to clean up. I
They
mean,
would do that. Okay.
50 the custodian's hours is what they're doing. So, yeah. Jonathan.
Yeah, I guess a quick question, if we could get Director Sassen back on. I think one question I have about just open public meetings requirements in general. I don't know if you're still there, Director Sassen. So depending on where we meet, so I'm hearing, if we meet at the high school, obviously there's restrictions there on, temperature checks and things like that. If we meet in chambers, there may be restrictions on the number of people that we can have there. Do you know offhand what sort of requirements we have as far as letting the public into the meeting? Is it a matter of broadcasting things live on YouTube and having a phone line open if there's not physical space to have everybody there? I think one of the challenges I'm seeing here is, keeping people socially distanced, but then also, our access to our meetings. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or guidance on that.
Subject to change as the level of state of emergency fluctuates and is lifted. Under our current situation, we are not under an obligation to have or to allow in-person public access, obviously. If we find ourselves in a state where we can no longer do virtual meetings, we have to do in-person meetings to comply with the Sunshine Law, then we would be obligated to make those meetings available live to the public. That could be them sitting in another room, watching it on a closed circuit TV, because we're under no obligation to allow citizen comments or citizen input, but they have to be available to see it live. So is that on YouTube? Is that on CCTV? Is that live in the same room? Perhaps as we gradually come out of this state of emergency, the Attorney General gives us some more guidance on that. But at this point, we're either in it, which means we can do virtual meetings without public present, or we're out of the state of emergency, which means we go back to the rules that were in effect before February. I don't know if that is a roundabout enough answer for you.
Typical lawyer answer.
From Chad's smile, I think his answer would probably be pretty close to the same thing.
Well, I am curious, Chad, do you want to chime in on your perspective of these options?
Certainly. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, from my perspective, I guess, as long as you guys can socially distance, we're fine with either option. Obviously at the high school, you have more room than you do in council chambers, but it also will come at a higher incurred cost to the city, where if you don't have to do that and you can socially distance and meet all the requirements of the open meetings laws at council chambers, then I don't see an issue with that whatsoever. As far as like requiring a temperature check and all of that, currently we don't require temperature checks into our building. We have our staff check their symptoms at home, and if they're fine, they come in, and if not, they don't, and they let us know. So, I don't know if that is a Newark City schools requirement or the district or that's at. But I think either option sounds safe to me, mainly because you can socially distance. Now, if you do it in council chambers, it won't be your traditional meeting, but you'll still be there. You'll still be conducting city business, and you'll be socially distanced without an issue. So I don't see a problem, with that whatsoever. And we'd be happy I can come down or have somebody come down and take a look at it again with you, since you have it marked off, and give you any guidance that we may have. We'd be happy to do that. And I spoke with Doug Ute as well, and we'd be happy to do the same at the high school. We're more than willing to help out any way that you guys want to get back to normal business. We did have an in-person Board of Health meeting last month, and we had several members that couldn't make it, so they did call in. But We did it via Facebook Live, and we met the requirements that the prosecutor laid out for us. So you're seeing a lot of entities get back to that, and I would be happy to help you guys in any way that I can to get back, if that's what you want to do, get back to in-person meetings. But it sounds like Director Rose did a super job of laying that all out for you, and got everything measured off on where you can sit. And it sounds like that's a pretty good plan. And you're obviously in the commons at the high school. I'm familiar with that space. It's much larger, so there wouldn't be an issue there either. So I think, in looking at it, if it were me, it's cheaper to do it in council chambers and it's safe there. So, that seems like a viable option, but, it's just going to be a matter of what you guys want to do. And like I said, I'd be happy to take a look at it and give you any guidance that I might have to help out. But it sounds like you have two very viable options there.
And just for clarification, when we talked with Doug on Friday, he didn't, we're talking a month away. So he didn't say that temperature correct checks would be, things are flux. So I guess it's a point that I wanted to make. So he didn't say that would be required of us to do. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as Mr. Sasson said, the last order, this order goes through the end of June. So by the time you guys are meeting in July, it may not have been extended. So, you may be under a totally different set of rules at that point. So, I don't think it's a bad thing to plan for it now and to be ready with what you want to do in July, but just with the understanding that, things may change completely. If they change, I think they'll change more towards being more lenient than more strict. I definitely think that, but, I'm just like the rest of you guys. I watch the governor at 2 o'clock and find out what's happening just like that. We never know what he's going to say. So, my guess is, you'll see some more leniency in that, in the next order after it expires on June 30th. And you may be able to get back into council chambers in a more traditional format at that point. But at this point, based on past history, we'll know that answer on either late June 29th or early June 30th at that point when it expires. So, we can take a look at it as we get more guidance and provide input as well.
Don?
Thanks, Jeremy. I've talked to 4 other councils this week also, talked to Zanesville, Heath, Pataskla, and Lancaster, and they're all going to try to do social distancing in their council chambers, either the last meeting in June or starting back in July. So I think most of the folks around that I've talked to so far are trying to get back into their council chambers, just an FYI.
And to add to that, I did speak with Tim Hicken, the city administrator out in Pataskla, about a similar plan to what you guys had proposed in their council chambers. And they're working with their law director to make sure they have access and they meet the requirements. But I do think, like you said, Don, I think they're trying to go back for their second meeting in June in council chambers. I haven't spoken to any other councils yet, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time.
Jeremy, let me jump in for a minute. Some of the things that your committee and some members of councils aren't aware of is last week I spent a significant amount of time with Council President Ellington, who was kind enough to spend his time with the city helping resolve a use of chambers issue, because we have the courts beginning to start back up in this building, as well as the tax department. The collection deadline changed to July 15th. And some of the differences between our community and, say, other communities is that we do have the courts and the tax department in the same building. So there are competing uses by other entities, by other elected officials for chambers during the day. And that's one of the things Don and I worked out with the courts, and not completely yet with the tax department. And the council clerk and Don were kind enough to even allow us to use council's office for a month from June 15th to July 15th, so people could get the returns done in there. So those are some of the things that we're doing too. And then you got to clean after people come in and people have to go out. So there's a lot of things at play here, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Doug Sassen?
Chad, I think
I
probably,
can add to that just a second. Also, so our clerk will be working from home for the next month or 5 weeks with helping Dave out in the courts. But if you call the regular number, it'll transfer over to her cell phone. So she will have access to everything she has always had access to, but she will not be in the office because they're going to use those 3 offices for 3 different individuals to hopefully fill out income tax or whatever they need. That's it.
Thank you, Don. Doug Sassen?
Chad, I think you probably answered my question. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if we were to assume for purposes of this discussion that the state of emergency were to be allowed to expire on June 30th, would it be your expectation that there would be some in between ground here with regard to the relaxing of those social distancing rules or recommendations, that to the extent that the plans that we currently envision for social distancing might be relaxed or eliminated? You may have access to information we don't, or have some better gut feeling than we do, but if the state of emergency were allowed to expire, does that mean our social distancing concerns are lessened or eliminated?
So, yeah, I definitely don't have access to other info. I wish I did. But I think what you'll see if it does, just based on, like you said, my gut feeling, if it's allowed to expire, I think you'll see the requirements for social distancing go away. But I think the recommendation for social distancing is around for quite a while, at least from the state's perspective. I don't foresee us going back to business as normal on July 1. I would foresee that recommendation being in place for the foreseeable future. And now that would be, again, not required, so it'd be up to council to decide what you guys would want to do, and we'd be happy again to work with you, on that decision. But I think that recommendation will be around at least through the end of the year, would be my guess.
Sean, you had your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to just really quickly talk about the usage of masks as well as social distancing. I think that we need to consider that, and something to think about in addition to our safety, also, as elected officials, as leaders in our community, how and what we do right now does set an example for the community. And I think it's important that we continue to prioritize the health and well-being of ourselves and our community, and choosing the option that is the safest during this time. So I don't know if you could talk about masks at all.
Sure. So, like I said, we had an in-person Board of Health meeting. We all sat 6 feet apart. Everyone wore a mask during the meeting. Individuals that spoke took their mask off, mainly so that people could hear via the internet. It's hard to hear with it, and then last thing you want to do is have a public meeting and no one can hear what you're saying. So individuals that spoke took their mask off. We were 6 feet apart, so we would still be not considered, quote, a close contact with someone who would be a confirmed case of the virus. But as you said, Councilman, we were trying to set an example as well as the health department, wearing those masks during the meeting and still socially distancing as well. So it would be a recommendation. You don't have to require it. You could. And again, you can recommend it for the public as well as they come in, but it's not a requirement for the public at this point. But Mr. Sassen may be able to speak to those requirements better than I can for the public at that point.
Well, I can simply say that the court has reopened essentially full time this week with a regular docket without jury trials and catching up on back criminal arraignment. So we're going to, beginning tomorrow, have a significant number of people moving through City Hall and into court. And the judges are going to require that they all wear masks, but also, and also the third floor and the fourth floor common areas have been marked off for seating. for social distancing. The docket is being modified to accommodate social distancing. But when testimony is being offered or attorneys are speaking on the record, then the mask is removed. So exactly what you were talking about there.
It seems to me like there's still some numbers that we need to get for both, either for microphones in the council chambers or for microphones up at the high school. So it seems like we got some information that we could still gather. And since we're not planning to come back until July, then maybe we, this be a beginning of this conversation. I don't think we necessarily need to say yay or nay on either option right now. I mean, unless I'm thinking differently, but it seems like we could get some more information and come back to finish it up. Jonathan?
Yeah, I guess the other piece of information I think that would be helpful is if Chad could take a look at Chambers and see how we've got it marked off, and give some consideration to maybe where we would want the podium for public discussion. I would think it probably need to be moved back to the back of the room, thinking that the space we have for seated members of the public would be towards the back, and that would be the easiest way to kind of minimize movement around the room too, right? I mean, I think you're trying to keep folks from having to walk from one side of the room to the other, minimizing exposure to everybody. So, and I guess the other one other thing I just mentioned is absolutely, I think consideration for our health, certainly the public's health, but also the continuity of our city government, right? I mean, I think an important thought to keep in mind here is we've got to all stay healthy so that we don't all go down, under the weather at the same time and prevent, us from having a meeting with a quorum. So I appreciate everybody, taking the time to have this discussion today. I think it's an important one.
I agree. I appreciate everyone thinking about this, and not every one person. I mean, Don doesn't know the health issues that each of us may or may not have. And so I appreciate us having this discussion tonight. So what we'll do then is I'll just call another meeting in 2 weeks, and then we can get some financials and quotes, and then we can further discuss if that sounds okay with everybody. Okay. Anyone want to speak that hasn't spoken?
Just one thing I would say is if someone wants to reach out to me and schedule a time for me to come down, I'd be happy to do that, anytime, and probably would be good to do it before your next meeting.
Hey, Chad, I'll take that on. We'll be in touch in the morning.
That sounds good, Dave. I appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Again, thank you, everybody. Oh, Don.
I think we probably ought to think about masks just for the 3 older people there, for myself and Sasson and Marmy. So keep that in mind.
I'm glad you left me out of that group, Don.
Some older than others.
What was that?
Okay. No other business before the committee tonight. Then we'll adjourn for the evening. And then again, thank you for the consideration. And Chad, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Okay.
No problem at all.
Thank you. This committee is adjourned, and council will begin at 7 o'clock. Thank you all.
Thank you.